So thanks very much for being part of the Haptic and the Virtual exhibition and for joining tonight. I'm really looking forward to having a discussion around your works, and we've got some questions that you guys have obviously contributed to collaboratively. So it's going to be a nice chance to find out more about your practices and about your reasons for the works you submitted. So we'll start by a little introduction to your work. So I don't know if anyone wants to be brave and go first. Or we could maybe, should we go, Veronica, I'm going to pick on you. We'll start. Sorry.
Introduction of my work, or me?
Introduce your practice, and maybe if you want to talk a little bit about your work that you've got here as well. It's okay, just whatever you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, okay. Well, I've graduated last year from the Royal College of Art Sculpture Master's Program, and my work is always somewhere between painting and sculpture, but lately going more towards objects that are placed in installations that are quite site responsive, and sort of alternative domestic ways of hanging has become part of the concept. And so my work is generally quite playful. I think that sums it up.
Cool, brilliant, thanks. Should we work our way round? We've got Yambi next.
Yeah. So I'm also a RCA graduate, although I graduated in 2018 from the painting department. And these days in addition to painting, I'm doing some sculpture, installation, and immersive technologies, sort of all blended together. I'm interested mostly in the way that consciousness, sentience, and empathy evolve in living and non-living beings. So this has included like an investigation into topics of embodiment, ecology, cognitive science, theoretical physics, and so forth. So the work that I submitted for this, if you want me to talk about that now or later.
Yeah, I can give us a introduction. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So basically these are based off of Collodny figures, which are these geometrical patterns that emerge when you have a surface of a fluid material and it's vibrated at certain frequencies. So these are all different sound frequencies. And what I've done is taken the 2D pattern and then created a 3D object based on that and then painted it. So it's this sort of translation between multiple dimensions of something emerging out of, well, nothing. I don't know if you can call sound maybe one-dimensional. But yeah, into 2 dimensions and then 3 dimensions and then back into 2 dimensions. So yeah, that's my work.
Oh, great, thank you. I think next we've got Abby. Is that right?
Am I next? I can't see where I am in the picture. Okay, hi, I'm Abby. So my work, I guess I probably call myself a sculptor, but I work across lots of different things. So sculpture, performance, video as well, and photography. I'm interested in embodied vision and notions of how we see things, how we look at things, and the experience of vision, I guess. Particularly at the moment, I am doing research on digital images and how we take them and how we look at them and how we share them and interact with them. So that is sort of the basis of one of the pieces that is in this show, which is called All My Photos of Sea, which is made of 2 elements. One is paper, handmade paper, which is made from paper. So it's a screen grab of all the photos that I have taken of sea, as determined by the Google search algorithm, printed out and then remade into paper. And then the second element of it is ceramics, little small ceramic imprints of the part of the back of a mobile phone that takes the picture, the camera aperture. And then the other work is a slightly older work, which was based around a old 1990s Magic Eye book. I don't know if anyone's old enough to remember Magic Eye, apart from me, but there are these pictures where they were like kind of weird, abstract, pixelated, coloured pictures. This was before the internet almost, I think. And if you looked at them right and focused on weird, you kind of saw other pictures inside them. So I had a whole book of these things and I was mucking around with them and I made some works about them. And one element of that was I'd scanned them and reprinted them and then dissolved the ink from the printer. And then that became a sculptural work and that was exhibited a few years ago. So yeah, they're the two works, but that's me at the moment.
Brilliant, thank you. Next we've got Afra.
Yep, hi there. My name's Afra and can you hear me? I don't know if my Yorkshire internet is good enough. Okay, great. I also graduated from the Royal College it's almost a year ago, in July last year, from ceramics and glass.
Oh, I can't hear you.
The Yorkshire internet.
It's gone still. Oh no.
Oh no, hopefully she'll come back. Veronica, whilst we're waiting, do you want to talk a bit about your work? You didn't say. Oh no, Afra's back. We'll talk about your work at the end.
I thought we were just doing introductions first. Okay, yeah. So a bit about the context here. The lockdown.
We'll go back to Afra's back. Yeah, we'll jump. We'll do about your work. Sorry. Yeah, carry on.
It's like living in a black hole.
Oh no.
Oh no, is she gone again?
Yeah.
Oh no. Okay, Veronica, you go. It's like a tag team.
Can you scroll up again?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, cool. All right. So the lockdown just gave me some time to reflect on my practice. I think everyone had a similar experience, but in particular, I realized my aesthetic and color schemes are super strongly linked to childhood obsession with MS-DOS computer games, and they're kind of 8-bit pixelated pop art design, and every aspect of them is very playful, every aesthetic aspect as well. And in particular, in the classic jump and run game Commander Keen, which is very similar to Super Mario, jumping on the heads of these dangerous little aliens incapacitated them, which was illustrated by their necks being squished into and trapped in their bodies. So they couldn't move and they were very confused. It was quite funny. And suddenly, in lockdown, I identified with this temporarily incapacitated creature a lot. And so while our social and work lives were relocated to digital realms, it seemed entirely reasonable to download a video game character into a handmade relief painting, just for balance. Also, it was quite comforting to revisit these old games, of course. And I tried to preserve this tension between the two realities throughout this transformation from the animated digital 2-dimensional into the static sculptural 3-dimensional. And within the piece, there are 3 different steps. So the alien is a flat relief, and the ray gun is almost 3D to provoke this urge to interact as a player or a viewer. So the guns, they stand for tools like a mouse or a joystick that we interact with, that we have to use to interact with the virtual via touch. And the rest of the scene is somewhere in between. Yeah, I think the aim was just to be haptically and visually generous and transmit the playful, fun ethos of this game into art. Something fun for the lockdown period.
Cool. Thanks, Veronica. Have we got Afra back? She came back and I think she disappeared again.
No, I'm here.
Okay. You are here. Cool. Sorry, we jumped
If
back to Veronica.
That's
Are you?
fine. It's very funny. It's a good example of how the internet doesn't always work, which is yeah.
Yeah, it seems quite appropriate. Yeah, jump back into chatting
No,
about work.
I'll go back. Okay. So,
Yeah, fire on
right.
if you can.
Yeah, I'll try. Yeah, so I don't know if you caught any of it, but I think of my work as a ceramic collage, really, and building on stuff that I made from the Royal College in for the degree show last year. It's bringing together found objects, so plaster mold creations, and yeah, at the moment, because I've had quite a lot of time up in Yorkshire, I've been experimenting with how I use plaster molds. So instead of just using them as they are, I'm kind of going back into them and dividing them, and so that's what you've got in the images on the show. Maybe come back to me later in case the internet breaks again, but yeah, it's bringing together lots of different ideas, really, of my
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Next we've got Harriet.
Hi there. I'm Harriet, and I am in my last year at college in the ceramics department, about to finish, and not have a degree show. But anyway, that's another whole nother conversation. But my work is really about coastal erosion, particularly the North Atlantic coast of Devon, and I've been looking at the ecology of the area and the erosion of the rocks and the geology, and that's what this piece is from in the show. And basically, I use lots of layers of different clays, and then I cut them back and form the shapes that are like the sea and the rock formations, and I've also, the second photograph is I make a lot of work that is unfired, and then I film it when the tide takes it away, and then I go back sort of a few days later to see if it's come back, and I search, and sometimes it has come back, and then I take it back to London and fire it. And this piece in the middle is a piece that actually I found after it was about 2 days. I found it on the beach, so it came back, and then I fired it in the end. So yeah, it's that sort of, I suppose I'm sort of handing over I feel like I'm handing over my work to the elements, and then if it comes back, that's great. It's like a gift that's come back. So yeah, that's me.
Well, thank you so much. Got Ella next.
Hiya, so I'm in my last year of my MFA in Newcastle University, and I make installations, sculptures, and wearable costumes based on haptic touch and kinesthetic learning, so learning through bodily movement, and I create tactile opportunities for interaction, challenging audiences' relationships with their bodies. I create work because I want to promote touch as a utensil when encountering sculpture and installation, as I think it's often a sense that's overlooked in galleries. So I want audiences to immerse themselves in the work without barriers and boundaries. And I'm interested in touch psychology, touch therapies, sensory rooms, and the tactile quality of cells through a microscope. Do you want me to talk about this work, or do you want me to do that further on?
If you can do, and then obviously we can refer back to them all later on. That would be great. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so this work is a latex costume, and your arm strapped to your hands in the costume, so you can't use your arms to touch, and you have to use the costume to like navigate your way around the space. And it was meant to be for performance, but I finished it in around March. I've not been able to perform and have an interaction with an audience yet, but I've been thinking about how to do it virtually through like Zoom or Instagram Live, and maybe trying to get people to interact by asking questions like remotely and live in those sorts of ways.
Cool. Brilliant. Thank you so much. And last but not least, we've got Katie.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Katie. I'm currently doing an MA Contemporary Art Practice in Edinburgh, but I came out of teaching art and photography for the last 6 years. So I took a selfish year out to try and sort of develop the practice really. And it's just opened up a huge new world of exploration. So I trained as a photographer, always been interested in photography, but I started the Beautiful Error, which was about 3 years ago. And that was kind of like a photographic venture where I corrupted imagery on purpose, delved into coding and JPEGs and glitching aesthetics. And that's where I kind of came into my MA. But in the last sort of year or so, I have started to develop more sort of tactile work because I'm interested in knowing how and if we can actually touch digital. So I was going from 2D, trying to translate that into 3-dimensional spaces, thinking about digital nonsense, different environments, trying to kind of, physically look at how pixels are in and around us and how we can touch those. And then my recent work, and these are the 2 pictures which I submitted, were the connection between geology and new media technology. So I actually went to a quarry in Scotland. It's one of the last working quarries in Scotland, and I grabbed hold of these massive pieces of coal just before lockdown, and I've photographed them and sort of collaged them together with my digital almost glitching. And it's kind of like an idea of how we're powering technology, so looking at sustainable energy resources, how that's powering, thinking about data centers, where the internet begins, where it ends, thinking about the land and environment that's affected by our use of industry, looking at labor as well. So these 2 pieces called Power in the Cloud and Data Dreamland, almost like a utopia of sort of what future digital data centers or environments could look like. So that's kind of the point of where I am.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. Thank you everyone for sharing. And obviously I hope we get a chance to reference back towards the works during the discussion. So I'll probably just leave it on the central ones, and then we can kind of refer back and forth as and when, and go into some of the questions that you guys have collaboratively put into that document. So I thought a good first one to start with would actually be the last question on the document, which is with the development of immersive technologies, some with haptic feedback, do you think virtual experiences can ever fully substitute physical experiences? And yeah, let's keep it very, very fluid, and if anyone wants to jump in at any point, it's like, yeah, whoever wants to discuss really. Do you want me to say the question again?
Yes, I think it's yeah.
Fire away.
Yeah, but I don't know if anyone's like experienced like virtual reality in terms of like headsets or this kind of augmented reality where a still image becomes real life, or quite through movement when you're looking at pictures. Quite a lot of apps and applications now that can create that, and I think the world of an exhibition will change, not just from what's happened recently, but I think it's really interesting to sort of play around with that interaction, like I think it was Ella was saying, between how we physically touch something and how cognitively we know maybe what that feels like, but then how we experience it from a screen or from a virtual surrounded sort of thing. So yeah.
Sorry. I was just going to say there was an exhibition in Prague called Touching Masterpieces, and they had haptic VR gloves so you could touch work like real. And it was for like the visually impaired, and they could touch work such as like Michelangelo's David through these gloves. But it still didn't let you touch things like you couldn't feel the temperature of the materials, and you couldn't like feel the weight and the heaviness of materials as well. So you can sort of still touch the work, but you're still missing the materiality, I think, from physical touch. But it's really interesting.
Things are advancing so fast, though, that who knows, maybe in a year or two, you'll be able to feel the temperature in those haptic gloves, or even finer textures. Because I think, the haptic feedback is quite a recent thing as well. I guess this question was on my mind because recently a lot of art exhibitions have become, there have been a lot of like online viewing rooms, which is interesting, and a lot of physical work like paintings and sculptures are now like rendered in a 3D space, and this is how people are experiencing physical exhibitions during this time. So yeah, it's interesting. I guess that's why it felt very relevant right now.
I wonder if it kind of will spur on a more public art, so it's kind of more accessible outdoors instead of contained within gallery spaces as well. It's just a thought.
How do you mean in terms of what, making public art focused more around ideas around haptic?
I don't know, maybe if galleries and exhibitions are not always as they were, and through people being able to see or produce work outside, like for public spaces that create more interaction, maybe on a safe. Just thinking of what's happened with the lockdown and things like that.
Yeah,
Be interesting to see how people work, maybe collaboratively or in wider spaces.
That brings us on quite nicely to, do any of you feel like your practices have really changed during lockdown? Use of materials or this?
Yeah, I think, well, I haven't been able to go to the studio at all since the middle of March, whenever it was. And I've managed to convert my shed, which you might be able to see in the background, into a very small studio. But I use a lot of ceramics, and I haven't really been able to do much of that, although I do have a small kiln. But I think it's kind of more, not just like the kind of logistical restrictions of not having a studio and not having your staff and not having your materials, but like kind of the fact that I don't have any time because I'm like homeschooling my kids, and like just your psychological space is different. And I think that it's kind of made me, in a way, it's kind of made me a bit more experimental and a bit more like, I get 10 minutes of the day to do something, and I just do whatever I can do, like rather than worrying about stuff too much, rather than thinking, oh, what's like conceptually the right thing to do at this stage of this piece of work. Like I just don't really care. Like I just make, and I think that's freed up my practice quite a lot. Like I've been making stuff with. So one of the works in the show is made with like reconstituted paper. That's something I'd never done before. Like I just, one day we've got like a massive box of recycled old scrap paper in our house from all of the worksheets my daughter's been doing, and like just stuff my husband's been printing off from working and stuff. And I just thought, I'm not throwing it away, I'll do something with it. And then I just started making, like mulching it down and making paper. And that's sort of opened up a whole new kind of material for me, which is exciting and fun. So yeah, I think it's been, in a way, it's been interesting to see where your practice goes when it's pushed into a limit. And I think any kind of limit does that to creativity. It like makes you kind of realize what's important to you and what's not important to you, and what your ideas really are about, I guess, maybe.
And was it not wanting to phrase things away a sustainability thing, or more just that you didn't want to? Like, I know I've been very conscious.
Yeah, a little bit. Like I was just like on the second day, I was just like, oh my god, we're going through a lot of paper. Like, it was my daughter's 6, and she's only little, but like all of the school stuff was just like, print out this worksheet, print out this thing, print out a picture of a horse for her to colour in. And I was just like printing out a shitload of stuff from our printer, and then like I don't know, I just thought and half of it would hardly get used. And I just thought, oh, I might be able to just reuse that paper to like draw on it, and then it just accumulated. And I just thought, I think I saw something like some video about somebody making paper, and I just thought that looks easy and fun, and just the process of mulching down paper and reconstituting things that had a previous life and making something that's like much more of a sculptural material out of something that started off as a image, like a flat image, is kind of relates to some of my ideas anyway. So it just became a kind of fun thing, and so I can kind of do it in my kitchen whilst the kids are doing something on the other. It's like, it's not dangerous. Like a lot of the stuff that I do is like hazardous, so like the kids can't like be there at the same time. So a lot of that, I think, is just like I've got like a mixer and I just like soak paper, and then for your birthday I go and mix it down. And so it was to do with it wasn't really a little bit sustainability, like I try not to throw anything away really, but more just that was the thing that was there, that was the stuff that was there in my house that I could make work from. So.
And can you read bits of it? Like, have you left like that bit there? Is that
Yeah, a little bit. Depends how much you whiz it. So when I first did it, I whizzed it right down, and then I realised, like, if you don't whiz it so much, you get little bits left, but it's not that controllable. But I still, because I've only just started doing it, it's kind of still in development, but I do find it interesting. You can kind of still see bits of the little tiny photographs that were there before, or some of the writing, or like a scribble from my daughter, or whatever it was. And then also like the colour, the kind of, whilst you get bits of image left, you also get this kind of colour that like that whatever you put in it ends up making kind of like, whether it's like a weird blue colour or a weird pink colour, and I find that quite interesting. I'm quite interested in colour and where colour comes from. So yeah, it's fun.
Have you else found any significant changes during this time in terms of practice, like either good ones or maybe ones you want to forget once this is all over?
I've just found that I have been able to carry on working, even though it's on a small scale. But I've just found that I've been photographing in a much more locally. So I've been seeing things around me much more. So using my phone really to take lots of photographs, and appreciating things that are very close to home. Whereas before I was always going out and away and to the coast, or to college. Or I've just found that I've appreciated, creatively appreciated things that are right there, rather than thinking I've got to go elsewhere. That's kind of fed my practice more. I can't say that my practice has changed particularly, but I've just been taking a lot of photographs, I've noticed, and a lot of film, and so that's really, and I've been thinking about this space that has been created, in my view, between this format and touch, because obviously being a ceramicist, my work is very much about touch, and I think to me there's still a disconnect between this format and the experience of physically being somewhere, and I'm just interested in that kind of bubble of space, that liminal space, because it's something you can't really put your finger on it, but it's so there. So I've been thinking about those kinds of things, and time, another one, because time seems to have gone so. It's not being punctuated like it was in the past. So I wake up on Monday and then it seems to be Friday again. It just seems to have. So I've been looking at time, and looking at deep time, as in geological time, and current time, and how important that is to us to sort of have marking time, and how we wake. So I've been thinking about that. So it's lots of thought processes have been thrown up because of this lockdown, I think, but particularly the spaces one, the liminal spaces, and I found now as well, when I go and see people, or when I meet people, because you can't hug them or kiss them, or there's this awkwardness between the physical and there's that, and it's people don't quite know what to do, and I just think that's quite interesting. So that's my take on things.
Yeah, I think that leads us on really interestingly to the question you posed actually, which is the haptic more important than ever now that we have limited physical connection with each other?
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? I mean, yeah, I've definitely got some thoughts on that one. Anyone got any comments on that one?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I feel like not in the context of art, but just in the context of life, that that the people that you can touch still, or the things that you can touch still, have become much more. Those interactions have become much more rewarding and more special and more just prominent. Like, you just notice them more. I think, like, to what Harriet was saying, like, you're just noticing, and appreciating really boring things that before would have just been boring things that you wouldn't have even thought about, like, but that are now like quite just enjoyable and nice because you can't do them with others or in other ways.
Yeah, it's like kind of increased awareness in every aspect, isn't it? I think. Is anyone on their own? I'm on my own, so I feel like quite a kind of strong feeling about just even now meet people one-on-one and go for social distance walks. It's still very, very strange to have spent this long without proximity to another human, and especially for the first 8 weeks, I didn't really see anyone at all apart from in a screen. So it's this real disconnect between, and it even where if I saw people on a Zoom call, like a social, like hugging or dancing together, I had to leave the Zoom call because it was really triggering. Really strange. The kind of, but not necessarily in a negative way. It's just a really interesting thing to experience, to be kind of I don't know, just so disconnected from things that you took for granted for so long in your life. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, is anyone else on there? Has everyone else got company? Yeah. Nice. Appreciate it. It's good. That's good. I've just started my plants.
I think it's a bit like having a slightly sort of sensory deprivation, in that you kind of then appreciate when like things are introduced one at a time. You appreciate them more when, like you were saying, you don't sort of notice them normally. So for me, physicality is really important for me. So I'm very glad that I've been able to go into the studio and use clay, because actually if I was on Zoom meetings all day, I'd just be so grumpy because I just need that, and I don't have to keep. I find that I'm doing a lot of looking at my phone, a lot of checking Instagram, a lot, which I never did nearly as much as I do now. But actually, it leaves me with a feeling of sort of a hollow feeling, actually, not very satisfactory for me, because I need that touch. For me, I really need that physical touch. So yeah, that's why I put that question on the document.
Do you, with your work, do you like the viewer to be able to touch it in an exhibition setting, or is it or if they buy your work, are you kind of encouraging that haptic?
Yes, yeah, very much so. Yeah. I don't feel precious about it. I'd rather they touched. Yeah, definitely.
Do you find ways to encourage that when you're exhibiting it, or is it more just hoping that they do?
No, not particularly. I mean, I would never put a "do not touch" sign on, but I'd encourage people to pick pieces up and look at them and turn them around. And there's not necessarily a right way up. They can be moved around as to what the audience might want if they pick them up. It's not a right or a wrong, basically.
Yeah, it's interesting with ceramics, isn't it? That often it compared to sculpture, it is that touch element is kind of encouraged a lot more than it is with a lot of materials with sculpture. I think it's really important. I'm going to find another question. What about inspiration in terms of social distancing or quarantine? So this isolation period, or what we were just talking about not being able to get close to people. Has that inspired anyone's work recently?
I've noticed like shadows more, and I don't know if it's because we've been lucky, because in Scotland we've had amazing weather. Who knew, you know? But in terms of like shadows, and especially from looking after like Arthur Seat's huge volcanic um, beauty spot, which I can walk around, and yeah, I've been inspired by sort of the layers of light and the shadows of people against the kind of environment too. So that's certainly something I've noticed more. Especially with the rocks as well, I guess, with some of my works at the minute.
My work hasn't been exactly inspired by the inability to touch other people, but I'm planning a curatorial project. It's called Touch Me. And I'd like every artist to pose with an object they made, so they can perform it or present it, hold it, cradle it. So I'd like to outsource that need to touch to the objects that they've obviously touched to make, and then also touch to perform it, or make it work in a slightly different way outside of the white cube. So the artist also becomes part of the work. Yeah.
When are you hoping to do that project?
Open call is out next week. It's like free advertising. Yeah. I posted on your wall.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, does anyone
Sorry.
have?
I've been making like social distancing gloves, so like you can still go for a walk with someone and sort of hold their hand, but it's like an extended hand, and one person holds one bit and one person holds another bit. It's quite weird. And I've been making weird fluffy costumes, and I was imagining if the fluff, because animals can like hold the virus and we can hold it in our hair and stuff, but I was thinking if you could like invent something like a fur that would just catch the virus in it. So I was trying to make these like weird furry costumes.
I feel like your social distancing gloves are going to make you very rich. I
Yeah.
would pay money for that. I saw someone put a sheet up against their door and made armholes this weekend on social media so that they could go and see their mum and give her a hug on her birthday. So like hugging.
Oh.
It's really lovely. And I was having a conversation at the weekend about buying those Zorb balls so you can go out and Zorb with it.
Such a good idea.
Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting to start thinking about different. Yeah, have you tested them out? Can you actually?
I've got them right behind me if you want to see.
Yeah.
So this is one side, put your hand in, and it like joins up.
Oh.
They're brilliant.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because we're on sharing the screen, we're not going to on the recording. It's not going to show that. So maybe can you just describe them a little bit again?
So they're kind of, if you imagine gloves that are connected by the fingers, but the fingers are so these are 1 meter, but I'm gonna make a bigger one that's 2 meters, so they're further away. And the inside where you put your hand, it's got like fluffy textiles in the inside of a pillow, so it still feels like you're squishing someone's hand or like a teddy bear or something.
Brilliant.
Oh, one.
Yeah, I'm definitely in the market for this.
Actually,
sorry.
I've
yeah, go
also
on.
seen people sit with in a restaurant in, I think it was in Germany, and they had those woggles, you know, those swimming pool things that are 2 meters long, and they had them
Oh, yeah.
attached to their heads.
Oh my goodness.
So there
That's
was like so that then you knew in the restaurant that you were 2 meters away from me. So I think it could be a whole new, like Ella, you were saying, I think it's quite playful and actually it's a lighter side of things, which I think is really good. And the funny, trying to see the humour in the situation. I think that's really important. And I'm sure there'll be a whole new sort of movement of work based on this time we've had. Like you like your gloves. Yeah, they're
and
great.
you visualize the distance, because I've noticed recently that it doesn't, I myself included, like it's actually 2 meters is actually a lot wider than you think. So often
It's getting smaller as well, isn't it?
yeah.
I've noticed. I was out today with my kids and I was like, yeah, everyone's just totally ignoring it now. 2 meters is enough to drive a car through. You should be able to drive a car. I think if you can drive a car between you and the other person, that's far enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think most people are. I think though, like I've kind of, on the one hand, I felt like some of the restrictions have been helpful for me, but on the other hand, like I'm kind of resisting making work about lockdown or about COVID, because I just feel like maybe sometimes I kind of have an idea for something and I think, no, that's not really my practice, that's not my work, isn't about that, like that's just me trying to make something, and I haven't, because I'm sort of starved of maybe what I would normally be inspired by. So I've had that little bit. I mean, that's maybe a slightly more negative view on it, but like I feel like I'm having to try to resist to not let myself get distracted in my practice with stuff that is just like obviously a current hot topic. It's hard to not think about. It's hard to think about anything else at the moment, or talk about anything else with anybody. So it means that it's kind of infecting the thought process a little bit more than I'd like it to.
Yeah, it's also quite soon to respond as well. Even if you did work quite a political way, it would be quite a fast response.
Yeah.
Was it cathartic making that work just for yourself though? Sounds like it probably got some anger.
Not really. No, not really. Well, kind of. It was kind of. It's basically it was something that I was going to do a proposal for an installation, and then I was just like, I did it, and I was like, no, it's just, you just look at something, you're just like, I just don't even like it. I don't even, and it's not even interesting to me, so I just throw it in the bin, and then I don't want to talk about it anymore. but I realised that it was because I hadn't really had time to be properly immersed in my work and my ideas as much as I'd like to be, and therefore the only thing that came to mind for this brief was something that was too much about 2 meters and blah 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 and stuff, and yeah, so. But generally, I've it's not been too bad. Not been too bad.
I guess that brings us on to a slight tangent, but linking with the ideas of what roles an artist may or may not have within certain situations. And the question, what role do you think artists can have in discussing the relationships between the virtual and the haptic? And have you read anything interesting in relation to this, or seen anything, or what kind of research have you done in relation to these ideas, either recently or ever?
To do with the connection, I read a really interesting article. It was in the New York Times, and it was called something like "Why Zoom is Terrible," and it said that that it's difficult with freezing and buffering, that psychologically it's quite draining and difficult for your brain because it has to fill in the gaps, and it also, you're not getting the mimicking someone's facial expression, and that's quite difficult for your brain to figure out, because you're kind of filling in the gaps. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. yeah, it's definitely a more tiring experience staying online than you'd realise and teaching online, and you don't get that energy transparency. It's quite an unusual thing. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Go.
I was just going to say, they were saying that sometimes it's just easier to phone someone up and you get it like a bit nicer in that way, and it's less difficult and like tiring when you've had like a full day of Zooms all day.
Mm.
You're taking out that visual.
Mm.
Yeah. Any other recommendations?
I've been reading.
Yeah.
I've been reading a book called Other Minds: The Octopus, the Sea, and Deep Consciousness, I think it's called, by Peter Godfrey Smith. And I've just gotten to this part that's about how fish and earthworms, basically fish communicate by sending out electrical signals to each other. But then the problem is that without this sort of signal that also cancels out their own electrical pulse, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a pulse that another fish is sending and the one that they're sending. And it's the same thing with an earthworm. Like, it recoils at touch, so when it crawls along the ground, it has to generate a counteracting signal for the touch receives. And it just got me thinking that, the touch that we as humans receive from each other, from interacting with each other, is a completely different experience than just being on our own and, touching our own face. It's interesting that it's so different, when someone else is touching you and then you're touching yourself. And yeah, it's just an interesting difference. So I think it does matter to everyone's sort of well-being, because we can tell the difference on a very chemical and biological level.
I saw a lecture on on perception and how, well, I think it was about Hegel on one hand and Schopenhauer on the other, where Hegel, at a time much more famous, probably still, was talking about the ontological implications of the mind and body being part of the world or of reality. But then Schopenhauer contradicted this a bit, and he said that everything we know is merely acquired through the senses, and how that perception of reality correlates to actual reality is unknown. And the only one real object that we know from the inside, or that we can know from the inside, is our own body. Yeah, I think actually Ella Louise illustrated that perfectly with her work in the show.
Cool, thanks. Any other recommendations? Anything?
I've
read it. Sorry.
Go on.
I read a book called by Timothy Morton called Being Ecological. I don't know if anyone's read that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great book. Really good book. I recommend that. Yeah, very much about the haptic, really, and how we're living. And I mean, it'd be interesting to. I read it a while ago, but I think a lot of things I now look back on and reflect in a different way to how I perceived things before when I read them. I think it'd be quite interesting to reflect back. And also going back to the Zoom things and the digital. I think with the digital, it's for me, it's that two-dimensional thing. So when you're seeing a person when you're seeing an object, you're seeing it three-dimensionally, and when you're seeing a person, you're seeing them three-dimensionally. And so I find the flatness and the 2D aspect of a screen, that's where I find I have the difficulty, I think. So the fact that we're having our show online, I think it's the way things are obviously going to go. But for ceramics or sculpture even, or I find it quite difficult to get my head around, really.
Yeah, I think even for, definitely for ceramics and sculpture, but I think even for painting or photography or even print, like there's something different about being not just the haptic element or the spatial element of being in a space with a piece of work, but like the present, like the sort of the existential presence of being in the same place as it, like relating to its scale. So there's no scale on a screen, like even though you can show something in a picture and you can go, oh, I can see how big that thing is, like you don't feel that scale like you do when you're in front of a Rothko like you don't, it's not the same. And I don't think that is kind of a hapticness which is I don't know how we're defining haptic, but like I think that there's something about physical presence which is you can't replace. And I think it goes back to the first question about how even if the technology gets really, really good at like mimicking all of the kind of signals to the brain for what it feels like to have the temperature and the weight and all of the different bits of feeling something and seeing something, it's really hard to replicate that experience of being in. And I don't even know whether scientifically, like, they know how to do that. Like even just basic things like how when your eye focuses on something in the distance versus something that's closer to you, you can copy that in perspective, but it's not the same as what your eye actually does when it's looking at something far away. Like, so yeah, I think that's really interesting kind of. I agree. I don't think you'll ever get to a stage where, or hopefully not, where everything can just exist on a screen.
No,
I don't want to be alive in that world where that happens.
No. There's loads of research, like media theorists are looking at, like, when you have like a phantom vibration, or you think that you felt your phone go, or it's almost like an extension of us, which is what technology is now becoming, and that's kind of interesting reading. And obviously we're using it so much more that
Hasn't it always been the case?
Say again.
I feel like my knife or my hammer is also an extension of my body.
Exactly. Well, that's very true. You become so. I think it is in a way, and from a cognitive point of view, when we're making those connections, but even like touching the brushed aluminium of your laptop, those sensory things, we get so used to those materiality, the kind of the smoothness, the coldness, the look of it. And I was reading a book called The Geology of Media, and I'll send you the link if you want, but it was talking about like dust and how the particles of technology, if they're degrading and they're just kind of getting like sediments within the ground, seeping back in, copper and all the fibers and the metals and the chemicals that are created, we're actually breathing it back into our own lungs in a way. And I'm really fascinated in how that's a kind of a full circle of how technology is going back into us internally, as well as having that sort of extended connection, or it changes our senses and our haptic experiences. That's what technology does.
I've done a few like
I think these
VR things and AR. Sorry,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, I haven't got a particular read particularly on haptic stuff, but there is something that, like, I think is interesting in that thing we were talking about, like, can things replicate the haptic, like, digitally? And a friend, I'll have to send you the link because I don't know if it's searchable, but a friend sent me this thing. It may have done the rounds on social media, which is just like this. It's music, basically. It's just a piece of music. It's recorded with this new technology, but when you listen to it through headphones, it's like, it's really difficult to describe. It's like you're in a club listening to the music, and I can't. That sounds like, oh yeah, because someone sent it to me and I was like, what? Doesn't make sense. And I did it, and I was literally like, my mind was blown. I was like, I cannot believe it. It's literally like the sound is coming from a speaker, and that's not like haptics per se, but this idea that you can create a sensation like that I wouldn't have thought you could recreate just through sound. And even like when I first watched a VR, like, you know, like a headset VR thing, a friend of mine is a coder and he like put VR headsets on us like years ago, and like the sensation of going down a VR roller coaster, if you've ever done that, and you feel sick like you do if you were on a roller coaster. So like I do think we underestimate how much our brains and therefore you know, codable signals can create those sensations. But I still like to think that there's an element of, especially in the human to human contact, that you wouldn't be able to replicate. But yeah, that's kind of gone back to an old question, sorry.
No, thank you. Yanbei, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I guess this also builds off of what Abby was saying. But I really feel like the virtual space has become almost a place where we outsource our brains. You know, how Veronica was talking about her hammers and her tools are like an extension of her body. I really feel like computers and phones have become extensions of our mind, like almost an exterior second brain, because so many of us are reliant on it just for, you know, our memory, storing things and keeping appointments, you know, keeping track of time, our interactions, even just navigation, our sense of direction. And I think, yeah, people who've grown up with these things or who went through, you know, developmental stages, I wonder if almost our neurological wiring is slightly different because we've become so reliant on these things. It's almost like we're already these sort of hybrid human machines, and I don't know, the next stage is just to have the technology go inside, which they're already experimenting with.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about if this time period is going to increase people's kind of distortions about their body image or potential like narcissistic, like the fact that there's very few platforms now that you can't hide your own image, and I really like the ones that you can. You're always having these interactions where you also see yourself, which is quite an unusual situation to be in. And I know it's a short period of time, but it's long enough now. And if it continues, like, what will that have a long-term effect, and especially on younger people who are still developing? What effect is that going to have on perception of sense of self? And it's going to be
it's weird actually that idea of looking at a picture of yourself. Like I had this weird thing when my daughter took my phone the other day. As I said, she's 5 and she just worked out the selfie button. So she presses the selfie button and she just takes hundreds of photos of herself. Like, and it's this really weird thing where you're just like, and then it just made me think about how, like, when I was growing up, I don't think I looked at a photograph of myself until I was like 15. I was like, you didn't have photo. You know, my mum probably did take a few photos of me, but then she had to get them printed out and put them in and out. Like, so this, other than looking in a mirror, the idea of the video image or the photo image, so the live photo image of like a selfie image, is an interesting thing to me. Like the fact that you're looking at yourself live, but it's not like a mirror. It's like I just think it's interesting. Like that,
It's
that's just going to be normal.
2.0.
You can just turn a block around and look at yourself and take 100 billion pictures all at the same time of yourself.
What's that?
But yeah, interesting.
It's mirror stage 2.0, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm conscious of the time, so we've got a few questions left, but I just wondered if any of you had any other questions about each other's work before we wrap up, or got a couple of last questions that we can go to as well, if that's okay.
Katie, I really like your work. I think it does that thing, which is the 3-dimensional thing and the digital combined.
Thanks, Harriet.
I really like. Sorry, did you hear that?
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's really interesting. I haven't seen that you know, so in such material sense really before.
Ideally, I would have made them into actual sculptures and put them back into the quarry or on a coastline or something, so people would just come across them. Because I like this idea that we've maybe always been digital, or the kind of fossilized versions of what technology might look like in a million years or something. And I've got an idea of printing on aluminium.
Yeah, they're interesting.
the digital picture and just kind of bonding it to the actual rock. I don't know how or when I'm going to do that, but that was probably going to be my degree show. So these are just like digital interpretations of what it might be, but it does cross those boundaries between both 2D and 3D. So yeah, I'm glad you like those. Thank you. Yeah.
I think you might find we had a talk yesterday, I don't know whether you saw it, with Matt G. And he's talking a lot about kind of similar ideas and like layering within both the printed media and geology. They might be interesting.
Oh, really?
It's on our YouTube and our Facebook. Yeah.
Okay.
And
I missed that. I'll check it out. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that idea of printing off a glitch, a digital glitch into the real world, it's really interesting.
Yeah, because that was the hardest thing. Is like, how do you make that a physical experience? Because we're so used to seeing it on the screen, or as an accident or a broken picture or something. But interestingly, I'm really like Ella. Your work spoke to me because I've printed digital pictures and glitches onto latex, and
cool.
there's a natural only because it's obviously a stretchable fabric, and but it actually fades into the latex. The imagery just fades away gradually. It's almost like an antique digital picture. It's awesome. How do you find working with like materials like that and latex?
I quite like that. I know that eventually they'll just biodegrade and then they have like that lifespan. I think it's really interesting. How did you manage to print onto latex?
So it was latex and rubber bands, and they were just heat pressed. So the digital imagery was like on a transfer paper that was heat pressed onto the fabric, but it actually seeped through to both sides. And I've tried on just bog standard like rubber bands that are wrapped around a piece of wood, so they're quite taut, and then print it on. But again, they've kind of degraded and crumbled and broken and snapped, which again is quite interesting. But it still has colour, and some sort of digital imagery on it. But
I'd love to see what that looks like. That sounds really interesting.
Oh yeah.
I just accidentally activated Siri that just read out the entire text. So have you ever done that? It starts to really quickly read. It's sorry if that interrupted, but slightly weird glitch in the technology. Any other comments on anyone's work or any questions?
I've got one for Abby and Afra. So both works are to various extents related to how we interact with objects on a table or maybe a desktop. Is that maybe a new updated version of a tableau?
A new updated version of what? Sorry, I missed the last bit of that.
Of the tableau, this sort of assembly of various things. I think it's a painting term.
Yeah, maybe. I think, I don't know. I think I do. I do tend to assemble things, like, but not in a constructive way. As in, I don't construct a new thing. I often just have lots of different elements that sit close to each other or sit on top of each other. And I think maybe, I don't know. I feel like I see that. I do see that quite a lot in sculpture at the moment. But yeah, I don't know if it's the new tableau or not. I don't know, but that is a kind of format I find interesting. I like the relation. A lot of my ideas are like about a relation between two elements of things, or whether it's like something that's image and surface and objects, or whether it's like. So if I find that often I'll have two things that I've made separately, and then when they come together, they kind of say a new thing, and that's often why they end up together.
I love the way you said tableau. I don't know if you can actually hear me. I haven't said much because I thought I may just end up leaving the conversation. I am here. I've been listening. It's really interesting. I've been listening in the background, just quietly in the hole in Yorkshire. No, I absolutely love the idea of a tableau. I think I get a lot from the idea of still life, and I mean, I've really been influenced by the isolation because my parents have an antiques business and they've got a lot of reclamation wood and marble and metal, and I've just been stealing it in the background and painting it, putting it all together. But the idea of objects relating to each other is, I think it's kind of fundamental now in my practice, the idea of a 3D collage, bringing things together. But I love the phrase a tableau. I think that's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. But I just wanted to say, with regards to the relationship of the screen to work, I think my practice has also changed because of this isolation. I've had to, photograph things and put it on Instagram and website and all that. But actually seeing my work as a 2D object again, it's very interesting. It's made me think about how I translate from dimensions. So I create drawings and then I create these sculptures from the drawings. But now I'm photographing things and putting them back into this 2-dimensional world. So it's creating new elements, I think, to my practice. So it's been interesting. But yeah, I love the tableau, but I can see a lot of velvet now when you say tableau and reclining nudes. So I don't, that's gonna appear somewhere in the future. It's been fascinating listening to you. Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt just in case I just left again. But loads of ideas for this. It's absolutely wonderful. It's a great collaboration of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
agreed.
because I can't see you, so I
Yeah,
wasn't sure.
thanks, Susie.
Well, yeah, thank you all. Still have 2 more questions. Has everyone got time? Or
Yeah.
we can
Yeah.
The last questions was, I guess it leads on quite nicely from that, talking specifically about like sourcing materials, and how important do you feel it is to be hands-on with those materials yourself? Do any of you outsource certain processes, or are you quite kind of keen on being very active in the workshop of the studio in terms of making?
So I don't have any assistants. I'm doing it all myself.
I find like, oh, go on, sorry.
I've been using my dad a lot. We've been cutting a lot of wood and marble together, which he's been enjoying. It's keeping him busy as well, which is good. I don't think I could make stuff if I didn't make everything myself, though. I'd go mad with lack of control, I think.
Yeah, I think there's an element that, in some like utopian future where I have 10 assistants and a factory-sized studio, that I'm sure I could find something for them to do, but I don't think that it would ever be like I kind of have to make stuff to think. I can't really, do you know what I mean? Like I don't think, oh, I'm going to make this thing and then go and then make it. Like it just, my mind, and I think a lot of people, I think we're probably all quite similar. I think a lot of sculptors and a lot of people who make work in the way that we all probably do, some of it's thinking, but some of it is thinking through making and through being tactile and being hands-on and things emerging by accident. And I couldn't just, there's no way I could do it without that. Like that is kind of part of the idea, if you like, of what I'm what I'm researching it needs to be done in that way. So even though a lot of the stuff I'm interested in is images and flat things and things that are from a computer or on a computer, or I find that's why I often do things with them that's like print them out and scrunch them up or dissolve them or make imprints of them, or like I have to use a tactile element to be able to think about them more, and like the physical interaction people have with them is the thing that I'm interested in. So
I'm all about experimentation like yourself, like just complete like layers of risk taking pretty much to find out what works. And that's kind of what I miss, kind of being in those chaotic workshops, making metal or jumping to printmaking and then coming back to my laptop to do the digital work. So it's all about experimentation and risk taking for me, and that's what I enjoy the most.
For me it's the same. I think I need to keep an open mind throughout the whole process of making. So I might have some ideas, but most things are improvised and during the making process, and then surprising myself with things that I never thought of before is the most gratifying part of it. So outsourcing is generally not a good idea. It's limiting.
Okay, and the final question is, someone said that they use social media a lot more during lockdown, which has had a surprisingly positive effect on the works. And then the question is, what are your relationships to social media, and do you find it helpful as an artist?
I think you can get sucked into it. And I find that I actually have times when I put my phone away, otherwise it's a distraction. But social media, I have become much more on it than I was before lockdown, I have to say. I didn't look at it nearly as much as I do now. But I've turned my notifications off, because otherwise my phone's just binging the whole time, so I don't have to look at the news anymore, and I don't get texts and I don't know when people are from Instagram. So I found that actually it's really been a really good thing, a really positive thing. But yeah,
I've definitely seen positivity too. Like I did like an online residency with a local cafe in up the road, and again I've just new contacts, and then they're opening the space for artist studios. So on the back of that, I've potentially got a space to work in the future. But also it's like a thing called the Artist Support Pledge. Has anyone heard of that?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So I jumped on that and I kind of got involved in trying to just spread the love and buying. I think the best thing about it, and if you don't know what it is, it's kind of a pledge where you sell your work, but only to a limit of £200. And then once you hit a target, you get to buy something back from an artist for the same amount. So it levels the ground completely with all different types of artists from wherever they are, and whoever's willing to share and buy back as well, and keep like the art economy kind of going. And that's what I've noticed has been a real positive shift through social media, especially in this time.
Yeah, it's also interesting how it's connected. Well, it always has done, but I guess it's more apparent now, like how much it's connecting different parts of the country and different parts of the world. Like we've had kind of artists.
Yeah, I definitely think that. Yeah. I moved out of London 2 years ago, and I've really felt like I've been missing out on, like, even though I used to travel in quite a lot to stuff, like, there's just something, you just can't go to every opening and every talk and every lecture and all these things. And I felt like actually during lockdown, I've had through social media and through making a bit more effort myself, maybe through connecting, because I wasn't massively into using social media. Like I did post stuff, but I wasn't like a super user. But like through making a bit more effort myself and finding new connections, but also just I think through a lot of things that would normally just happen behind closed doors in London, being forced online meant them more accessible to people outside of London. And that's a personal thing that's good for me, like as someone who is ex-London and misses that sort of the amount of stuff that there is. So that's been quite nice, like listening to lectures, or just seeing the work and seeing shows that you wouldn't normally be able to see unless you happen to be walking past somewhere in Shoreditch at the right time, or inside the Slade Lecture Hall, or wherever it was. So that's been good.
And presumably as well, I suppose
we wouldn't. Sorry.
I was just about to say, as well as being a parent, it makes it more accessible as well, because you can kind of juggle those different, and for us, like
you can do things on when you have time, and also like you can, like, not all of the things, but like some of the things I'm kind of like, I'll just log into the Zoom call and put myself on mute and I'll turn the video off, and then I can give them dinner whilst I'm listening to like a really interesting lecture from an artist. Like, so it means you can like multitask things, whereas before I would have been like, I have to carve out 4 hours to get on the train and go into London and go to that thing, and so I wouldn't have bothered for it unless it was something I really, really wanted to see and I knew was going to be good. Whereas now I can just like go, oh yeah, I might try that, and if it's not good, I'll just turn it off and no one will know. Although they do know, but
take more risks as well as the documentation of your work as well. Like when you post stuff, I feel like you can take more risks on Instagram and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like because everybody's on there and everyone's doing that, and everyone's kind of in this kind of, well, we're all locked down and we can't really do our work properly at the moment, so it gives everyone a bit of a license to go just throw stuff out, and I feel less judged. I feel like people are going to be less, just that the community is less judgy at the moment because of the situation we're all in, so that makes you a bit more confident to just go, I'm just going to post this random thing that I did today and not worry about whether people like it or not.
Yeah. And also,
I was going to say, at the end of the day, we wouldn't all be doing this probably if it wasn't for, which is, I would, so it's great. So there's been huge, and there's lots of positive things that have come out of it. We had talks from, I don't know, Glenn Adamson, but he was in New York, and he's written lots of books. He's a really interesting guy, and he was able to give us tutorials from New York. And so that wouldn't have happened. So there's been lots of that, like you said, like you were saying, that interconnects, that global connection is great, which I hope continues actually.
Yeah.
I think that's a nice note to end, isn't it? I'm gonna stop the recording if that's okay, unless you have any final comments. Feels like a good positive end. I'll stop sharing and then how do I stop recording? Here we go. So